Hi there, and welcome to the Support Local podcast. I'm your host, Roger Tumminieri, and with me today is Kay Mathews. She's the Executive Director of the Ontario Business Improvement Area Association. Kay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Roger.
I've really been looking forward to having you on the show, Kay. I'm really interested in what you do. The Ontario BIA Association adds tremendous value to business improvement areas across the province. But before we get into all the great things that you do there, I'd really be interested in learning a little bit more about how you got to this position. Can you tell us a bit about your background, please?
Oh, my background. Actually, if you want to hear my whole childhood history, I'll tell you on that another day. But for today, just know that a number of years ago, living in a small community that's enveloped in a big city, I answered an ad looking for someone to take minutes 8 hours a month. And it happened to be my local BIA, which I had no idea what a BIA is or was, but trained in minutes. So there we go. So they hired me after much harassing, because that's what I do. And a couple of months later, I said, if I sent them a 2.5-page letter saying that they need to hire me as their manager, and they did. So 10 years with that BIA, another 5 years with another BIA in another community altogether. So one urban, one rural BIA. Both those times I was with the on the board of the Ontario BIA Association in its early days as well. So we're talking back to the mid 1980s, where I first started working with my first BIA. Interesting to note that OBIAA in those days, OBIAA is the way we call it because it trips off the tongue a lot easier than any other derivative of it. But OBIAA was actually a committee of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, because every BIA in Ontario is governed under the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing's Municipal Act. So there I was. I spent a good 15 years in BIA management, which is what we fondly call being a street person. You're out on the street, you're helping your main street do what it needs to do. Then when they were looking for an executive director of pretty much the startup of the Ontario BIA Association as a fairly newly formed not-for-profit corporation, they reached out to me, and that was 14 years ago, and no looking back so far.
Very cool. That's very interesting. Maybe for the benefit of for our viewers who don't necessarily know what a BIA does or its function, can you just explain that real quick, please?
Yeah, so the basic history of every BIA in the world came from a community called Bloor West Village. Bloor West Village had a business association back in the 1960s. And for those of you who understand business associations, it means that somebody walks up and down the street and says, can you give us $20 and we'll put on a sidewalk sale? This is what it was in the 1960s. But this group thought, let's do something that really helps us actually move and work with our area a lot better. So they went to the City of Toronto and said, would you consider applying a special levy on, in those days, the businesses within Bloor West Village? So collecting it through the tax system, and then we could create a sort of an association that has a set amount of funding that we can use every year for the betterment of the whole community. The City of Toronto thinking, wow, what a great idea, but nobody ever usually wants to charge themselves more. They talked to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs of the province of Ontario, and the very first BIA legislation in the world was created on September 16th, 1970. Since then, obviously, BIAs have grown to pretty much most countries around the world, or most areas that would have a main street or a commercial core area. So Ontario has about 300, Canada 500, including the 300 from Ontario, 85 in Toronto alone. Business improvement areas are the name for them. And the job of the BIA, through the additional levy now on the property owner, is to beautify and maintain the publicly owned public realm, the public land within our commercial core, and to promote the area as well. So we're really not business improvement associations, we're business area improvers. So it's a little bit different. So we're the ones that put up the benches and the banners and often do the festival of events and the animations and activations. So we're the ones that are trying to keep our main street areas thriving and as community hubs and centers.
That's great. Great explanation. Thank you very much for that. And I love working with BIAs because they're just so passionate about local business, and they help to really drive that sort of hyper local economic growth. And I was curious to know, so you mentioned 300 BIAs under the umbrella of the Ontario BIA Association, which is a huge percentage of Canadian BIAs, according to what you just said. Can you speak to the value that the Ontario BIA Association offers to its members?
So we're actually, OBIAA is not a governing organization because each BIA is governed under the Municipal Act, and they are actually local boards of their council. So their parent, if you have, is actually their municipality, their city, or their town, whichever it is. So our role, therefore, is to really to help them by sharing resources, something we fondly call R&D, rip off and duplicate from each other. And this is an important part of what we do because there's no two BIAs alike, just as there's no two commercial cores alike. The architecture is different, the heritage is different, the makeup of the different businesses is different. We have really large BIAs and really, really small ones. So it's in all of our best interest to make sure that they are learning from each other. So that's kind of our core work. And of course, through COVID and beyond, we've really become much more involved in the advocacy work, understanding to government and to our communities how important our Main Street commercial cores are.
Yes, I've always been a believer that a vibrant business community adds tremendous value to neighborhoods and regions at large. Now, you've recently kicked off a Support Local campaign or initiative. Obviously, that term is very near and dear to my heart. Can you explain to us a little bit more about that campaign, please?
Absolutely. This we decided because of the situation that's occurring in Ontario. And for most part, most of our main streets have always been very local. We've always been the micro local areas within the province, within the country. And so we've always been there. I mean, when you think about so many, especially of our heritage downtowns, let's take an example of a place like Collingwood. Collingwood would have been the early commercial core for when we first started to settle Ontario. So the businesses, the buildings were all built organically as the need arose. And in the early days, we actually lived above our business. Right? We're often now putting our employees above our business, but we were truly an organic and local community. And that really hasn't changed. What has changed is the outside influences of the world. And those outside influences have been very, very challenging. And I'm going to go back beyond the most recent crisis. COVID, for instance, was one that was very, very challenging, and especially with some of the rulings that were made to determine that our small businesses were first closed. Unfortunately, and we found that was a little frustrating because we're often the ones that can actually control who walks into our doors, right? And we can lock the doors behind a couple of people and then clean up afterwards and put them back in. But unbeknownst to us, the decision was made ultimately. So, we had the 5 years of you're open, you're closed, all of those situations that happened with COVID. And then right on top of it, of course, we've gone into a little bit of an economic dip. But the other thing that happened during COVID was a huge increase in people shopping online. So we got comfortable in our homes. And it really, so we've had one thing after another basically on Main Street. We always often say we are kind of the ground zero for a lot of these situations that have happened. And I once had a mayor of the city of Ottawa say to me, you know, our main streets are like the canary in a coal mine. They're the first ones to feel the reaction of any change in the economy. And this is no different today than it was when former Mayor Watson said that to me. So it was really interesting in that, but now we have a different situation, and the different situation was with our friends south of the border, and this is one we never ever anticipated, and we certainly want to stay friends with this, but on the other hand, it's now time to galvanize Canada. So I have a phenomenal group of volunteers that work with OBIAA, and a number of them are really, really savvy and strong in social media, specifically Stephanie and Kat. So I'm going to give them all the credit that they deserve. They took the bull by the horn. They listened to our members because we do have weekly calls with our members and have done so since COVID. And they created a campaign as a gift to Canada. So the toolkit has social media, has the ability to put your own logo, whether you're a business, a person, or a BIA into it. And, you know, we're trying to take over social media with this logo. And so we're really excited about this. It is now going across Canada. It's really, really strongly being used in Ontario with many, many of our businesses and people, so say, taking it over. And the basic message is shop Main Street Canada, support local. This is never going to change. It's an important message that shouldn't be really something that comes and goes. It's just something that should be embedded in all of us, because local's always here. Local supports your fundraising and your sponsorship. And also, and the most important thing is, it's the place where we as people are allowed to gather. We can go to our coffee shops, go to our festivals and events, and connect with our community. So, you know, we have a lot to offer, but we can only offer it if we're supported.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Like when I think of community events, a lot of them are backed by, you know, a local business improvement area, and that gets people out. It gets them meeting their neighbors, and you know, I there's really no substitute for that sort of in-person human connection, which we lost during COVID, and thankfully we regained it. But you're absolutely right. Like I share the same opinion. Support local has now become synonymous with, you know, support Canada, just given the sort of macroeconomic realities of our time. Now, having said that, and I love to hear that it sounds like we're very much cut from the same cloth. You have 300 BIAs within the Ontario BIA Association. You've got a big conference coming up at the end of this month in Collingwood. Can you talk to us a bit about that, what it's like to organize such a large event, and what your expectations are, and the value that that conference will bring to your members?
Absolutely. In my early days, you know, I was very involved in our own local festival. I've been a manager of Santa Claus parades and festivals of nations events. So, you know, I've always been an event organizer on top of working with BIAs. And you know, really, the goal is always community building. It's always as we talked about, Roger, the idea of human interactions, which is something we need in a day where all we're doing is looking at our phone, which is not really a substitute for looking at each other through into each other's eyes. And so we really feel very strongly about that. So OBIAA was very proud when in 2021, we tied to be the very first in-person conference in Ontario. And the reason we did that is because our BIA practitioners, the people, were never stopped being on the street other than those 2 weeks, because they understood their area needed help. They were out there helping their businesses through the challenges of COVID. And so they didn't have as many worries about being in person as many other people did. So we came back to our conference. This is our 23rd conference since 2002. We are expecting about 300 people which would include trade show booths, and our trade show is, huge street lights and banners and all these other aspects as well. And then we have delegates that I was just looking at the list actually before we called. I think because of that Shop Local campaign, we're seeing people coming in from Manitoba, Alberta, from New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and there was one more. I think we've got a couple from Newfoundland coming in as well. So we're really kind of acting in a little bit of a way as the national BIA conference this year. Really excited to have the synergies of all of those passionate people working together. It is 2.5 days of a jam-packed program. So, we start with actual tourism type tours. And then we will have a trade show, of course, trade show welcome. We're just kind of finalizing all of who the greetings are from MPs or MPPs, but it looks like another election is going to be called, so maybe not so much the MPs. We have 4 streams of conference all the way through, and they're based on the 4 pillars of downtown revitalization, which would be governance and leadership, economic development, marketing and promotions, and public realm, which would be your placemaking and your beautification and maintenance. So everything in our conference follows those 4 streams. We have some great keynote speakers. But one thing that makes our conference a little bit different from most is we also have something called the mobile, where we're actually going to take delegates out of the conference site. We're going to take them to Creemore and Thornbury and downtown Collingwood, and they're going to walk up and down the streets and learn about how that BIA manages their Main Street area. So it's, ours is a little bit different. It's very interactive. And as you talked about right from the beginning, a bunch of really extrovert people who are so passionate about the work that they do, that the noise volume, it can be pretty loud sometimes, but it is an amazing conference filled with amazing, passionate people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think it ultimately boils down to people and the passion that they have for supporting local and for their local communities. And it's wonderful to hear too, that you're drawing in representatives and delegates from outside of Ontario.
Sorry, could you repeat that last bit?
Yes, I said it's extremely impressive that you're drawing in delegates and representatives from outside of Ontario. And like you said, it's almost like the Ontario BIA is sort of a de facto national BIA.
Well, just by the structure, obviously the idea that the whole BIA movement came out of Ontario and specifically Bloor West Village, by the fact that we have 300 of just around 500 across Canada, it does kind of make us the largest organization. But I'm really invested in making sure that every single province has an umbrella organization, and that we as umbrella organizations support our regional organizations and support each other. So I think this is a really important next step. We've been talking about this for a number of years, and of course, changes down south again have really galvanized that discussion.
Yeah, as things continue to change on the daily, it would be wonderful to have you back on this podcast, perhaps after the conference, just to regroup and maybe have a bit of an update. But in the meantime, if people wanted to reach out to you, Kay, or to get more information about the Ontario BIA Association, how can they get a hold of you and get some information?
Yeah, so our website is, got your pens ready, www.obiaa.com. Best to reach us through info@obiaa.com. That's our best way. Thank you.
And I've been following you closely on Instagram. What's the Instagram handle again?
OBIAA_.
Perfect.
Was that a trick question?
It was
I'm not a great social media
I think so.
person,
I thought I'd throw it in there at the end, see if I could stumble you. It's been wonderful having you on the show. I love the fact that you guys are supporting local. Again, it's an initiative very near and dear to my heart. And like I said, I extend an invitation, an open invitation to have you back on anytime. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us. And we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you, Kay. And thanks, everybody.
Thank
We'll see
you.
you soon.
Thank you again.